Dark Souls 2 is by far the most hated From Software game in their catalog of masterpieces. Many different critiques are consistently launched at Dark Souls 2, spanning from crappy gameplay mechanics, such as your health reducing upon death, or a story disconnected from the saga that is Dark Souls. And I myself made a video defending Dark Souls 2 and justifying why it should be played first before Dark Souls 1 and 3. However, today, this video idea originated from a comment on my Dark Souls story is a cliche video, another reason why Dark Souls 2 is the best. Yes, Dark Souls 2 fans do exist. I do not identify as one fully though, but I want to take a minute of your time and explain why I think Dark Souls 2 gets so much praise from fans. And no, I refuse to belittle their opinions simply because they want to be different. That is cheap and lazy in discussion, just because they believe something not felt by the majority of fans. With Dark Souls 2, often people view this game as a masterpiece. It masterfully takes what Demon's Souls did and creates an interconnected world that feels totally and completely lonely. It manages to feel comforting and vast at the same time. But the game itself isn't without its critiques. The second half of the game is rough. It begins after defeating Ornstein and Smough and obtaining the vessel from the Great Chest ahead. It then gives you the ability to fast travel and go to some of the weakest areas in the game. A pitch black area filled with skeletons and pinwheel, a flooded city with ghosts that are kings, a library which is quite cool, with Seath the Scaleless Dragon and his absurd tail, and sadly the big tree in the fire area of the game and the discharge boss. And while these may sound a little cool in theory, often people feel this half completely blows. The environments kind of suck, they have annoying designs like headless dinosaurs, and the lava sounds make your ears bleed, as well as bosses that are a lot less well designed than the first bosses. Well, those bosses still kind of suck. It just all around becomes a bit of a slog to make it through, making it prime ammunition for the Dark Souls 2 fanboys to blast at the game's predecessor, as Dark Souls 2 is probably the longest of the trilogy and doesn't necessarily fall off in the second half. I personally quite liked the memories, and I know I gave a lot of shit to retrospective storytelling in my other videos, but it felt like an interesting twist to see the giants and how they had originally interacted with the king and the golems that I guess kind of replaced them. But when it comes down to it, the best way to refer to Dark Souls 2 is it's consistent, and that consistency can be regarded at times as weak overall. I do know. And while I think that small things do hurt Dark Souls 2 a lot, one thing I think it does great is environmental designs. Neon poison lakes with windmills surrounding the area, an almost pirate cove that can be alit with torches, or the palace full of beasts with the stone dragon. And in my opinion, those completely take the cake over Dark Souls 1 and are completely justified by Dark Souls 2 fans. Another reason many Dark Souls 2 fans feel it outshines the other two games is its abundance of
original ideas.
Dark Souls 2 is simply original. The game is set in an alternate dimension, vortex portal thing, that you jump into during the intro cutscene. In many ways, it mirrors Dark Souls 1's world. However, it tells a quite different story from Dark Souls 1. Often, Dark Souls 3 becomes reduced to Dark Souls 1 nostalgia bait. At times, this does feel redundant, but it does heavily borrow from Dark Souls 1. Evidence being the Firelink Shrine returning, environments being carried over, and characters returning. All that I found from Dark Souls 2, however, was a giant with a giant seed, calling back to the giants because of the giants. And while yes, I do believe Dark Souls 3 really shines most in its DLCs story-wise, I can easily see why Dark Souls 2 fans feel justified because of the uniqueness of the story. Though, in many ways it's convoluted and makes less than ideal sense, and I still don't know who that flame blob guy is. But the queen being the betrayer of the king is interesting, and I think quite exciting towards the end. It still doesn't make that boss fight good though. Dark Souls 2 fans also praise their hub world, Majula. This place by many accounts is the best hub area. It is beyond calm and feels warm when you enter it for the first time and every time after that. It takes you to all of the areas in the game, and the well, I believe, functions well as it looks at you throughout the game, almost beckoning you to throw yourself down it, testing if you have enough health yet. I didn't buy the ladder, by the way, obviously. The hub in many ways set up key functions for hubs that follow in From Software games. You have access to the blacksmith and multiple useful gameplay functions from the hub. Dark Souls 1, you had to go to the blacksmith, cross the map, also giving you the ability to take off one's allegiance to Covenants in Dark Souls 2, as well as a total death counter for all Dark Souls 2 players. But all in all, the place is comfortable and has an atmosphere still unachieved in the following games. Now the last and probably most important defense by Dark Souls 2 fans is the New Game Plus and Bonfire aesthetics. Most people objectively find these mechanics to be superior to the other Dark Souls games. To start, New Game Plus, or the game that you play after you beat the game for the first time, think of hard mode or hero mode in Zelda. Typically, it results in enemies having more health and doing more damage. Simple, right? But in Dark Souls 2, they take it 2 steps further and add additional enemies or ghosts to the game, as well as adding additional conditions or enemies in boss fights. This completely changes replayability in New Game Plus, and it's unfortunate it is not more prevalent in the next games. Alongside New Game Plus, there are these things called bonfire aesthetics. You have the ability to use these at bonfires, forcing all enemies, including bosses, in an area become one New Game Plus higher. To put it in a more simple term, enemies come back and they are stronger, while you still get to kill them and are rewarded exponential amounts of souls by defeating them. This allows you to refight bosses in areas that you might like, or farm souls quickly while still being challenged. Surprisingly, From Software hasn't brought this back. That's about it. I'm a Dark Souls 2 fan. I like the game, and I feel it holds an important place in the From Software catalog. Please don't listen to fans who just say skip the game. It is a consistent sentiment, and it takes away the opportunity for many players to actually experience what it has to offer.